Hey, my name is Mike, and this is a guide to all the trash in Hellfire Citadel. Before Hellfire Assault, you'll find the Gorebound Felcaster. They do a couple interruptible abilities, and they metamorphosize at low health, doing raid-wide AoE. Siegework Technicians throw a crate at someone, dealing damage to anyone within 8 yards. The Contracted Engineer will put bombs on the ground and stun people for 7 seconds. You can interrupt this, and this can be dispelled. They also repair vehicles. Gorebound Fanatics will throw a ton of bombs that explode really quickly. Cauterizers will drop a Brazier that will do raid-wide AoE as long as it's alive. They also put dots on people and heal other adds. Gorebound Corruptors will heal themselves after bringing a player down to low health. Grand Corruptor Urog also does this, and he also spawns these voids that you don't want to stand in. Hulking Berserkers and Groot will slow people and put a debuff on the tank that increases the damage they take. Felfire Demolishers spawn these red circles you don't stand in. The Flame Belchers shoot green fire in front of them. After the Iron Reaver, you'll encounter Hellfire Guardians. They put a debuff on the tank that increases the damage the tank will take from the add's Fel Strike ability. He also leaps around. Shambling Horrors have a Frontal Cone ability. Fel Touch Shears also have a Frontal Cone breath, and they heal adds. Hellweavers will deal more damage the longer they're alive. They'll also spawn these green spider orbs that you don't want to stand near. The Assassins will stun the first person they come in contact with. They put 6-second dots on people, and they teleport around and hit random people. Before Kormrok, you'll face a Armored Skull Smasher. He charges people, has a Frontal Cone ability, and knocks you back. The Keen-Eyed Gronstalker has a Frontal Cone ability, and he also drops these bombs that you don't stand in. And the Grim Ambusher will stun you for 4 seconds when it comes out of stealth, also dealing a ton of damage. It has 2 different dots, one of which increases the damage you take. This ad can also vanish. Fiery Enkindlers will put a dot on you called Fel Infection. You pass this off to other players by simply walking through them. When you do this, you get a 60-second immunity to the dot. They'll also do focused fire on someone. You want to stand in this circle to split the damage. They'll also select people with primal energies. Those people will deal damage to everyone within 5 yards every 5 seconds, so you want to move away from people if you have this. The Fel Extractor will also put Fel Infection on you. They also reduce random people's healing received by 25% for 10 seconds. They also make someone explode and do primal energies as well. Shadow Infusers also do Fel Infection. They like to mind control people, and to break this mind control, you have to bring that player down to 50% health. They also reduce your healing done by 25% for 10 seconds. Like the other ads, they too do primal energies. And finally, they target random people with residual shadows. This will spawn a purple puddle underneath that player and just move out of it. Togdrav will spawn red runes that grip you in a hand if you stand in them. Morkron makes one of the pools shoot fire at random people. Make sure not to stand in these orange clouds. And he also does the grasping hands. Sovok will also shoot fires at random people. He also does grasping hands, and he'll knock the tank back, dealing damage based on how far they traveled. Togdrav, Morkron, and Sovok all have a smash, which is a raid-wide AoE. Gragra is found before the High Council. He has a Frontal Cone breath. Random people will get the Fel Touch debuff. When it expires, it deals damage to everyone within 6 yards of you. He also will leap to a random person. As many people as possible should be standing in the circle to split the damage. When he leaps here, he'll also knock anyone in that circle into the air. Before Kilrogg Deadeye, you fight Bleeding Grunts. If you stand in this circle, you take damage. The Bleeding Darkcasters put an aura on someone called Dark Fate. This will root them for 15 seconds. Once this aura is removed, it deals millions of damage split amongst everyone that's hit. The Salivating Bloodthirsters will run to a pool near the wall. If it gets there, it'll transform and deal more damage. If it does transform, make sure to interrupt Rending Howl. He also has a Frontal Cone called Savage Strikes. When it dies, it deals damage to anyone within 10 yards. Before Gorefiend, there is a Gorebound Berserker. He'll charge random people, leaving a fire on the ground, and he also puts a dot on people. The Brute will knock people into the air and puts a bad puddle on the ground. The Crone will spawn these little blue circles that deal raid-wide damage unless you stand in the circle. Make sure to interrupt Shadow Bolt as well. Before Iskar, you have the Fel Raven. He'll make the tank explode and deal damage to everyone, and also increases the fire damage they take by 100% for 10 seconds. The Shadowfell Warden does a raid-wide AoE called Fel Conduit. He also has a Chain Lightning for up to 5 people. The Talon Priest will put bombs on random people. Try to move away if you have a bomb. Delusional Zealots will throw a boomerang at a random person. It'll damage anyone that it hits and disorient them for 6 seconds. On your way to Socrethar, you'll find a Sargerai Enforcer. He puts a stacking debuff on the tanks that reduces their armor. The Soul Cleaver puts a dot on people. He also does a lot of damage with the Ripped Soul, so try to interrupt it. And he'll spawn these void zones that damage you if you stand 6 yards near it. The Adjutant does Consuming Pain, which does more damage every time it's cast, so make sure to interrupt that. They'll also put Unstable Shell on themselves, which absorbs a lot of damage. If all the damage it can absorb is absorbed, it'll deal a high amount of damage to anyone within 10 yards. For the Peacekeeper, turn your back to him for crowd control. Destruction does a high amount of damage to anyone nearby, and don't stand in the red laser. The Bannerman has a Frontal Cone ability that stuns you. He also increases the damage and health of nearby adds. Corvos puts a random player to sleep for 8 seconds. When they wake up, anyone within 6 yards of them will also go to sleep. He has a Frontal Cone ability that also heals him a little bit, and if you stand in the swarm, it does damage to you. Binder Aloha does a high damaging attack on its target that increases the damage that target takes from that ability by 1000% for 6 seconds. Tanks try to swap for that. Mystic Valrune has a Frontal Cone ability and teleports around the room. Mystic Aaron has a stacking dot that jumps to a new person whenever it's dispelled. Binder Halani does an interruptible ability called Soul Seer that does damage to anyone within 5 yards. On your way to Tyrant Valhalla, you'll have to do this gauntlet. There's a ton of adds that spawn here. Some of them are casters, some of them will put you to sleep, but none of them do too much damage. More adds will be spawning the longer you have portal portals open. In the four corners of this little gauntlet room, there is portals that you have to right-click to close. Closing these portals will make all the ads stop spawning. It'll also make Lord Aramel drop down to the stairs. Make sure to interrupt his cast because it does increasing raid-wide damage. Eridar Faithbreakers will bring your health down to 1 and you cannot be healed for 9 seconds. You ideally want to move away from them. They also spawn these little fires that will deal a little bit of damage to the first person they touch. That person will also get a debuff on them that increases the fire damage they take. Umbral Supplicants will do Unholy Aegis, which is a buff that they give themselves that deals raid-wide damage every 2 seconds. Vindicator Brahma will reduce the healing obtained by the tank by 5% per stack. He also spawns these big red orbs that you should avoid. If you get hit by this, you spawn a small pool underneath you. This pool will explode, dealing damage to you and knock you into the air. Somber Guardians will channel Guardian's Watch. This reduces the damage they take and increases the damage they do. Grim Collaborators will hit everyone within 5 yards and apply a debuff that increases your damage done by 50%. It also increases your damage taken by 25% per stack. Make sure to run away from them if it gets too high. Protector Badgent also reduces the tank's healing obtained. He channels Hollowed Sanctum and reduces the damage all other ads take by 75%. Adjunct Kuro also reduces the tank's healing. Make sure to interrupt Harbinger's Mending as it'll heal the ads. He'll also revive Badgent and Bramu. On your way to either Fel Lord or xhul'horac, you'll fight Dag Gorath. Standing in this box makes you only visible to other players in that box. Dag will sacrifice a random person. This person will be stunned and take damage until all 4 of these dogs are killed. The Shadow Burster will knock the tank back and stun them. Then they'll spawn a purple puddle underneath them. Anyone in that puddle after 5 seconds will take damage. The Dark Devourer will spawn these void zones that deal less damage the further away you are from them. Mech Barash hits the tank and the nearest player, so the tank should be stacking up. He'll also heal the dogs a little bit and make them do AoE sometimes. The Fel Scorcher deals a moderate amount of damage to random people. He'll do a raid-wide AoE every 3 seconds as well. When one dies, it'll deal a ton of damage to everyone and also make the remaining dogs do more damage from their abilities and when they die. So if you kill all 4 dogs at the same time, you're probably gonna wipe. Before xhul'horac, you fight Weapon Lord Melchior. He'll leap around the room dealing damage to anyone near his landing location. Anyone that he lands on is stunned. He'll also deal a high amount of damage to a player and applies a stacking damage done buff on them. If you get 10 stacks of this, you'll explode for a high amount of damage. For Void Scribe Athelos, make sure to interrupt Shadow Bolt. Void Glare is a dot put on a random person. This dot increases in damage and jumps to a random person within 5 yards of that player. When it gets low on health, you have about 10 seconds to kill it before everything within 10 yards of it takes a deathly amount of damage. Before Fel Lord, you'll fight Zarek Shikor. He disarms people and will throw his weapon, which knocks people back. Make sure not to stand near him when he's whirlwinding. Catwin, Glenivere, and Brianda have a high damaging strike. They spawn this void zone that only brings you closer to them. Run away from it if you care. Xiaogun will also disarm people. He also throws his weapon, which knocks people back. He'll then leap to it and send out a bunch of these purple circles you can jump over. He'll also smash the ground, dealing moderate damage and knocking people back. Vazil Fasag throws his weapon as well, and then Superman's that hoe, damaging anyone in his path. He'll also knock you back if you get hit. Before Archimonde, you'll fight Asgalor. He deals damage to a player and the nearest person to them. Make sure not to stand in these orange circles. He also puts a 20-second debuff on someone that'll kill them once it expires. This player's death will spawn a Lesser Doomguard. Asgalor is definitely your first priority. Lesser Doomguards will increase the time between your attacks and your movement speed. Kaz Rogal deals damage to a player and the nearest person to them. He does War Stomp, which damages you and stuns you. He'll also drain 10% mana from random people. Once they have no more mana to drain, they'll explode, dealing damage to anyone within 40 yards. And Theron has a Frontal Cone ability that deals damage and reduces your healing done by 50%. Make sure to interrupt sleep or it'll put a random person to sleep for 10 seconds. He'll also summon a Towering Infernal in this green swirly. The Infernal does a little bit of damage to people within 10 yards with Immolation. That was a guide to all the trash in Hellfire Citadel. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know down below in the comments. Thanks for watching and have a great day.
Asgalor?
Yeah.